Oh, no.
Go ahead and start recording and see if we have questions.
Would you repeat that, Ron?
Yes, sir. Just letting you know it's about 3 after, and if you guys are ready, we can go ahead and start recording and see if we have any questions. Are we ready?
Is that a question? No, I was about to say I don't have any questions.
No, I said we can start. If everybody was ready, we can start recording and see if we have any questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ron, I have a question. Let me hold on just a minute. Let me ask for Mel if she's recording.
Yeah, she's recording.
Oh, okay. I have a question.
Okay.
I can start asking my question.
The recording has started. When did we start recording?
Recording
started
when you first asked the question. Yeah, we're started.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I started watching college football only because I have a cousin that plays on Colorado team. But anyway, what's the spiritual significance of all these Africans going to Colorado? I still feel like they use us, the black men, as gladiators. But isn't there a spiritual significance on why everybody is going to Colorado? That's my question.
Everything shifts. And Dion, as flamboyant as he is, would be the last person you would think would be at a Power 5 school. But everything is shifting. And when everything shifts, it does not leave sports out. Literally everything. And I think yesterday when we talked about the balance and talked about how things are changing, even with seeing how hip-hop is in its year of Jubilee, all those things are changing. So it doesn't leave that out either. So I just see a shift, that's all. Primarily a shift in leadership. I'm done.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Also, I'd like to, respond, to your question. And when we think about Coach Sanders, it reminds me a little bit in terms of a mentor of mine, Coach John Chaney, at Temple, where the energy flow in terms of just, I believe, the spiritual message that he's sending, that is not just about, being a student athlete, but, being able to mentor or raise, young men, predominantly African-American, in a way that they have that father or they have that coach who really has a concern about the players. We talk about, sports is more than a game, it's an experience. And I just think that that's just another spiritual revelation for me, as not only I watch Colorado, but I think me and Ron had a conversation about this. And it's all about vibration. It's all about frequency. And I think yesterday, Evelyn, you mentioned about, what are the messages that are coming out in the macro. And again, when we can appreciate, the gamma rays, or when we can appreciate the frequencies in terms of how it relates to our spiritual nurturing. And I don't want to go off the subject, but it just have me to appreciate that there's a spiritual message that's being, revealed. And it's just an exciting time, as Pastor was saying, that it relates to everything. So I just don't take it verbatim or for granted, but I think that there's a spiritual message in it. So I just want to share those thoughts, unless there's any questions. I'm done.
I kind of see it the way you do, George, and what Pastor said. I think there is a correlation between what is taking place in college football and especially at Colorado and the NIL deals where players are being paid. Now, I think there's a relationship there. There was a real hard downplay many years ago when I was a kid about black colleges not being good enough. And it wasn't until the 70s that a lot of Southern schools started recruiting black athletes. I remember reading part of Bear Bryant's narrative on it, and some of the things he said. He wanted to bring in black athletes, but he didn't know how because he knew the pushback that he would get. So what he did was he chose one of the first schools that had black athletes was Southern Cal, and he asked, he spent some time with their coach and got them to come to Alabama. Well, Southern Cal beat the brakes off Alabama, and he used that as the doorway to bring in black athletes. And like I say, this is in the 70s, so not that long ago, early 70s, but in the 70s. So what does that mean? There was during the time that everybody was saying that the black athlete wasn't good enough. You heard that about baseball. You've heard it about every sport we play. They're not good enough athletes. But after this happened and Alabama kind of opened the door in the South, everybody sort of changed their tunes. And it went from that to sort of ignoring the historical black colleges as to say, we've gotten all the better athletes out of it. So they stopped paying attention to them altogether. So what Deion did when he went to Jackson State and then went to Colorado, again, I don't think it's any coincidence that the black athlete is shown in a different light and people are paying attention to it. It's a spiritual thing. I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but I do see what prompts you to ask the question. So with him looking at it and him, being calling himself prime time and being the light of college football now, away from everything else that college football has stood for, he just sort of stood out. And now the black players are flocking to play for him, and these NIL deals are following them. And that kind of stuff is no coincidence. So I agree with what everybody else has said. It is a sign of the times, or it is part of things to come. The money part of it is something that, in a spiritual way, I think is just there to get everybody's attention, because everybody pays attention to that. Everybody sees that. But I agree with there's something spiritual about it, and I think it kind of goes in line with what we're talking about now. So, and like I said, I hope that answers your question a little bit.
Good morning, everyone. A statement was made yesterday that hip hop is 50 years old. And I just wanted to add that that's what MTV and Rolling Stones is saying. Hip hop is 50 years old. However, the pioneers of hip hop, they're not saying it's 50 years old, saying that it's older. So if it intrigues you, do your research on it. The other thing that I wanted to add was, based upon the question Ms. Evelyn asked, or stated, we need to give the attention to what Deion Sanders did for Jackson State too. Can't just focus on the part of what he's doing with Colorado, because he did shake up NCAA of recruiting. And when you look at the top 5 or 6 money producing industry, number 1 is the Department of Defense. Number 2 is NCAA sports. Number 3 is prison industry. Number 4 and number 5, they're interchangeable: porn and student loans. So when Deion went to Jackson State, not only is he getting athletes to come to Colorado, he was getting athletes to come to Jackson State. So he kind of shook up the ranks of how recruiting is done. Thank you very much.
Ron, you did answer my question, and I appreciate all the statements that were made. And I do feel that we have a lot to do with it. So that's one of the reasons why I asked. But as I listen to Deion, he's teaching these black men on those teams, black young men on those teams, how to respect themselves, and I like one of his mantras is, I believe. So I just appreciate what he is doing with these young men on that team, because if you don't make good grades, you can't play. They're not going to just put you through the system. And so I'm just grateful that he's there. But that's why I brought it up, because I do believe that we do have a lot to do with what's happening in the universe. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Deion is doing what high school coaches used to do. And he's doing what coaches did at traditionally African schools. Whether it was South Carolina State, Howard University, doesn't matter. He's doing the same thing that black coaches have always done until they began to do things to try to fit in. Thank you.
Hey, good start. Good start, Tade. Good question. Anyone else? Anything? Any questions about the lesson yesterday or last week, for that matter, or anything that? Because yesterday we talked about current affairs. Not current affairs. Excuse me. What was? Yeah, I guess could call it current affairs. We didn't wasn't termed that way. We were looking at the signs of the times. And we were speaking of current affairs and some of the things that were brought up. We talked about the politicians and the senator, young lady who died. I cannot remember her name at the time; it escapes me. But all of those things being a part of who we are and where we are. We talked about the death of Tupac and what that means with the arrest. All of those things. It's part of the energy right now in the times that we're in. So any questions about any of that or anything else for that matter? Okay. What I would like to do, if you guys don't mind, I got up early, which seems to be the best time for me to listen to the lesson on Saturdays when I have to work. And I'll get up in the middle of the night because I sleep weird sometimes, but I'm used to getting up early. So I get up maybe 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And I always feel that I have the whole world to myself. That's how I like to think about it. It belongs to me to do whatever I want. And one of the things I enjoy doing is either reading or listening to our lessons. I was very intrigued by what the discussion was on yesterday. And every time I would think of a question, I wrote some things down that I had questions about, and then somebody answered it. but I saw a relationship, correlation here between something we talked about on last week and what we talked about yesterday. So I want to try to tie these together and see if we can get a discussion here. If you don't mind, I want to look at again chapter 12, and I'm going to tie in all the way to chapter 14 of Genesis. I want to look at this as to what we discussed on yesterday. So if you don't mind, look at chapter 12 of Genesis, and we're going to take a look at Abraham and see what that has to do with what was discussed on yesterday. Okay? In the book of Genesis, looking at chapter 12, it's very interesting. It's when Abraham goes down into Egypt and everything. But the first thing we discussed was looking at him when he was called by God to leave. So Abram leaves, and he finds himself in a place. The place he finds himself in, it says he proceeded. I'm looking at verse 8. And guys, I'm not looking at this verse by verse, but if there's something you want to bring out, please do so. Okay? I'm just kind of recapping to get some dialogue going here. So I'm kind of going to recap this, and you guys we'll take it from there. Then, starting in verse 8, then he proceeded from there to the mountain on the east of Bethel and pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. Okay, and there he built an altar to God. Now, the funny thing about that, if you go down to chapter 13, verse 3, it says, and he went on and journeyed from Neviv as far as Bethel to the place where his tent had been at the beginning between Bethel and Ai. So what takes place here? What takes place here? We looked at this. Bethel means the house of God. Ai is talking about a heap. It's talking about rubble. It's talking about things that it has no value to you. What is he standing between? The rubble is those things that he left in the first part of the chapter. He says, leave from the first verse said, the Lord of chapter 12. Now God, the Lord called Abram and said, go from your country, go from your relative's house, and go from the land and your father's house. Go from your relatives and your father's house to the land of the shore. So what is that? The rubble represents his country, his relatives, and his father's house. All the things that he valued, all the things that he thinks are important to him, he valued. Because when we look at the things that we kick off, the things that we think about money, we think about clothes, we think about possessions, cars, and those kind of things. But what about your internal values? Those are the things that made up his rubble. And those are the things that put him in the place where he put himself and said that there's a famine. There's a famine because these are the things that feed me. These are the things that make me feel important. These are the things that have defined who I am. And if there are no more, if I'm willing to give them up, then who am I? So he finds himself in this place, and this is what puts him in a tight place and takes him to Egypt. Now, without going into further detail of what takes place in Egypt, he conquers Egypt. He shows us how to conquer Egypt, and we talked about it yesterday. We talked about it yesterday when we talked about sitting with it. But if you notice something here, you notice is when he gets to chapter 13, when he comes out of Egypt, he goes back to the place where he says, this is where it began for me. This is where I started to see myself. This is where I started to gain understanding. This is where I started to believe that I say that you are Elohim. This is where that started to mean something to me. This is where I kicked off the old Abram, and I'm starting to become Abraham. I'm starting to see my spiritual self. So from this point on, if you read the story and look at it, he has to go internal before he can go external. And we're going to talk about external because there's no such thing. But if you notice here from verses chapter 13 and 14, that is when he starts confronting things from an external perspective. From an external perspective. So if you tie this in with what we talked about yesterday, when you look at chapter 14, it starts talking about him having the kings going to battle. All the kings of all these cities, all these places going to battle. That's no different than what you're seeing in Congress. That's no different than the things that we see that come up every day. That's no different than Donald Trump being a king over those who hold him in authority. So we look at all these things. If you will, if you look at the authority that even hip hop has over this generation, that is a king. So what takes place here? What takes place here? What we're learning to do, what this is showing us is how to sit with it, what this all means. Because I saw this yesterday when you guys were discussing this, I saw this differently for the first time, at least the sitting with the part of what does Lot represent here? As we said on last week, Lot had an opportunity to be the son of Abraham. When you look up nephew, it has two definitions. One definition talks about being the nephew or your father's brother, son of your brother. The other one talks about Ben, B-I-N, to be the son, to be so he had an opportunity to be one with Abraham, and he chose not to. So what does that mean to us? That means that no matter how far someone pushes away from us, we are still related. We are still related to the Lots. We are still related to the people who were enslaved years ago. We're still part of the ancestors. We are still the universe, and this is us. So Lot gave Abraham a stake in the game. In other words, you cannot lose focus of who you are as long as Lot is there. You have to go and represent Lot. And that is where we are right now. So questions or comments? What do you see here? I hope I did a decent job of setting that up.
Ron, so I'm sorry, I yield.
Go ahead.
So does any one of these concepts represent religion?
All of it is religion. All of it. See, Evelyn, one of the things that as a couple of things. One, we talk all the time about looking at the names and looking at the people here and seeing that these aren't talking about people at all. They're talking about concepts. They're talking about energy fields out there that's a part of man that we can take on or not take on. For example, every one of us is an Abram. Every one of us are going through, following that journey to see who we are. So what is a religion? A religion is anything that comes between you and the Creator. If you cherish your children to the degree that they come between you and the Creator, then that's part of your religion. Your bank account can be your religion. It's just not always talking about sitting in the pews. So anything that comes between you and seeing who you are and recognizing that and making the decision to walk in that direction becomes your religion. It is a thing that you are attached to that defines you and is more important than your relationship with yourself, really, or with the Creator.
One of the biggest religion is not only the church. If the church is number one, being number 2 with sports, especially with African men.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right, Pastor.
Wow. What make you say that, Pastor? Will you elaborate a little more on that?
Sure. Because African men, especially those who engage in sports and those who are wannabes, would do anything not to miss the sport that they engaged in. And they select teams like they own them, like they're getting a check every month, especially Cowboy and Steeler fans. They see that they're more committed to that than they are to doing what they're supposed to be doing at the church. In many cases, I'm not talking about everyone, but I am saying that I'm in the barber shop during football season, and all the time we traded so and so, and we go get it this year. That kind. We who, and then people are putting tattoos on their arms with their sports, the team that they are following. And the people playing the game don't even put tattoos in their arms about the team they're on. Then they have their cars wrapped in the colors and the insignias of those teams. So this is a deeply ingrained religion. And the gods of the religion are the players, but the real god of the religion are the owners. And probably 95% of the owners only see us as a dollar sign, as opposed to seeing us as men, as people. It's a dollar sign. And I believe that the universe began to force payment to college students because a lot of them are not going into the NFL, and they are being used as a farm team for the NFL, and they're being sorted out. Where you can pick cotton, but you work better than the rice paddy, that kind of thing. And when you talk about owning a team and trading a team, what is the difference? Because when you trade a player, you are negotiating money. So what's the difference in negotiating money for a player and selling a player to another plantation? That's why I said it. I'm done.
Does that make sense?
You know what? That was loud and clear. Thank you, Pastor Jay.
This is Ramel. So it's religion then also could be considered another, no matter how we see religion, it's a form of enslavement. We're enslaving ourselves to something that has no real benefit to us.
Yes. Anything that's a distraction from the Creator, from you, from who you are, from your unicity with the universe, becomes a religion. There are people whose homes are religion, or religious shrines. There are people who bank accounts, as Ron stated, are shrines or a testament to who they are. That in itself is a religion. So yes, you're absolutely right.
And Ms. Vermel, you turned your camera on. I don't know if you meant to do that, but it's on.
Thank you.
It is also a form of poverty. Religion is a form of poverty. It has, in the spiritual world, it has no true value to you. You gain earthly status, and it looks good with when you see things through the eyes, but spiritually, there is nothing to gain from it. But to kind of tie things in, again, I'm trying to tie into what you guys are talking about. Like yesterday, Pastor mentioned what I wrote down and talked about before you start meditating, clear your mind, sit with the situation, and you have to transform what you see with your eyes, and so we got into sitting with them, and we talked about centering of yourself and bringing back that balance in you. What Abram did when I talked about the whole thing I meant to say last week that I didn't say, that was very emotional. That's a very emotional thing for all of us. And part of me started looking at that is saying, Ron, you beat yourself up too much. Just learn to breathe. Everything's going to work out. Although what you see with your eyes, you allow those to influence your feelings and emotions. But I looked at that, and Abraham went through the same thing. So there's nothing more than what you were talking about yesterday. Learn to center yourself. There are going to be things we're going to see. There are going to be the kings of the earth that are battling, or the king that in chapter 14, Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, he represents superiority. He represents enslavement. He represents what is right. And everybody tries to go after the king. That superiority leads to separation. What does he do? You pay me. You, in order for me to protect you, in order to be a part of who I am, you pay me. And those separations lead to classes. And when you start seeing yourself as classes, you start seeing other people as classes. And that's what leads to the illusion of poverty. So when you learn to center ourselves, when we learn to see things with our eye, you recognize that the sign of the time is just for you to be centered, for you to see who you are, for you to know that this is an internal thing because you are the universe. If nobody else recognizes that on the face of the earth, you are the universe. And you influence everything by being able to transform what you see to your eye, to your spiritual side. We, as George said in the onset, we feel the vibrations. We produce the vibrations. That is your influence. Because Pastor talked about yesterday, how do we feeling those experiences? And I think Nick put it a different way. He talked about the negative and the positive energy of it. How do you influence that? You don't need to shape it. All you need to do is to experience it. You breathe on it. You sit with it. What we expect is harmony. That's what we're desiring. We desire harmony. You just sit with it. So when we look at this, again, me trying to pull all this together, this is just the story here of Abram is just a walkthrough in everything to me that was discussed on yesterday. It shows us that we are headed in the right direction, and when you do have those feelings and emotions that leads you to a tight place, you just embrace it. You embrace it the way he did. Yes, sir.
Sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
One of the classic examples of separation and how detrimental it is. Sometimes when you experience it, especially in this country, you don't see it as clearly as you do when you look at it in a different setting. One of the most classic examples of the production of poverty through separation is India. What the British did to India. The class system that they introduced to India is still in effect to this day. That's a classic example of class system. And we say we don't have classes in this country, but we do. We just ignore. We talk about the middle class, the upper class, but we don't label those who are in poverty. And by virtue of saying you're middle class or upper class, you are saying that anyone who is not in one of those classes is low class. So what happens when we talk about those who they say is low class? These are usually the people who live at the poverty level or below. Make sense?
It does. Anyone else?
Can you
Question?
elaborate a little more on that? Can I get a little bit more on what you're talking about, please? Will you explain a little bit more?
Poverty? Okay. People who are living at the poverty level, people who are unable to find a job, or people who are dependent on a paycheck every week, or they lose everything. That's poverty. And people who are considered middle class, they live from paycheck to paycheck also. However, they may have a few coins stashed away just in case. Then you have those who are considered upper class. They don't have to worry about anything. So if I'm middle class and Ron is upper class, then what is the other person who is not? Who do not have the means that we have? They're lower class. That's all I'm saying. That the whole world has been placed into a class system, and you can call it a caste system if you want to. It doesn't matter. It's still the same thing. That's what I'm saying. Anywhere you go in the world, that is the separation. That is the designation of separation between people in most areas, if not all, on this globe. I hope that helps.
It does. So do you think so what's happening with the migrants coming over? You think that's going to change by all them coming to America?
Honestly,
Are they bringing a change?
Honestly, I don't think they are definitely bringing a change. Another part of it is that they're taking their land back. They're taking back what was stolen from them, especially in the Southwest. And the rulership of Europeans is ending. It's just that simple. And the reason there is such a push against migrants coming from the southern borders as opposed to the northern borders and from Europe is because of the color of their skin. But the most important thing to recognize with the immigrants coming across the southern border is that they would not be coming if America and America number one and the Catholic Church had not destroyed everything that they had and taken everything away from them. So now they have been relegated to a poverty beyond anything we've ever seen, simply because the resources are gone, and the farmland has been taken by corporate farms in America. The oil is controlled by American and European forces. So they are actually being forced out of their land, and America doesn't want them because America do not want this country to have a voting population that can change the image of this country. They want to keep a country that is controlled by Caucasians only. And that is the fear that they are facing. I'm done.
Evelyn, that answer your question?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Is this making sense, y'all?
I mean,
Yep.
Yes.
So again, when on yesterday, Nick talked about intent, and what we do is maintain our focus. The feelings and emotions are going to come, just like we just finished discussing, and we don't do what I've done in the past and beat myself up. But I'm learning through our talks and our lessons and listening just to sit with it. In other words, breathe on it and recognize that those things in me that are being purged meant something to me at some point, and at times I will have to engage my feelings and emotions to deal with things. It is okay. It is okay. And when I sit with it, it doesn't matter how long it takes. I see it because I maintain my focus. My intent remains the same. My intent remains the same. So when we talk about putting stuff in the macro all the time, that is not just for us, it's for others to go and get. So if the value system that we are changing is turning into a heap and a rubble and is being wasted, then that too will be in the universe. That too will be replaced by something more valuable. You see? So it is you again, changing yourself changes others. So I gained a lot from listening to the video from yesterday, and I again see how to tie it in with when I was looking at all those kings that are battling and looking at what they represent. They represent the old and the young, the new. They represent everything. And they represent everything that is earthy and everything that has gotten our attention and all the distractions. And they contrast. They contrast with the thought of being a nomad. If you are nomadic, the first thing I think about is, what is poverty? What is poverty? Because if you are nomadic, if that is your mindset, meaning that you don't allow yourself to attach to anything, nothing comes between you and the Creator, then there's no such thing as poverty. A nomadic tribe or tribes take care of each other. As you've heard me before use as an example, my dad had 14 siblings, as I'm sure a lot of the families did in those days. But I grew up knowing cousin so-and-so and cousin so-and-so and this one and that one and that one. And there is no connection. There is no connection on the physical side. Connection was through love. Because back in those days, if somebody had food, you came to eat. If somebody had shelter, you came and lodged there. And there was no questions about it. Nobody even blinked an eye. Go to so-and-so house. We don't have anything. Go up the hill at the so-and-so house. And so-and-so in there didn't say, who's child are you? Where you come from? Sit down. Sit down. It's time to eat. Sit down. That's nomadic. All children belong to me. I am the mother. I am the father of everybody. That's kind of what I got out of yesterday's. We stay with our intent. We stay who we are, and sitting with it is masterful. Sitting with it is beauty. Sitting with it is regaining that balance. Just sitting there and breathing, and maintaining that focus of all. And I heard Kathy, I don't remember her exact words, how she put it, but just remembering. I have to remind myself sometimes who I am. So it doesn't matter. And as I said, if you go back and look at those scriptures, it is only after Abraham comes out of Egypt, he separates from Lot, meaning there are going to be some that are going to separate from you, some that are extremely close to you. It doesn't matter. Everybody's close to you. You know why? Because you are everybody, and everybody's attached to you. There can be no separation. But when your eyes see it, it doesn't matter because your eye knows who you are. But when he goes through this, when he and Sarah goes through this, that's when they start seeing external stuff, external problems. They start seeing an illusion of external. There's nothing external. But they recognize the fact that I'm still who I am. I go back to the place I built the altar to God. I'm still who I am. And I can deal with anything.
Suppose that what we are referencing as concepts, more than that. Suppose what we are referencing as concepts is actually the thoughts of the Creator, the thoughts of the universe itself. The energy of thoughts that lays a pathway to show us what unicity feels like, the experience of the unicity. Those what we call concepts, and when we are talking about them, what people are hearing is the voice of Elohim, because we are Elohim. And when we are speaking truth, we are Elohim. So that's what they're hearing, not James Richard, the physical man who majored or in philosophy or economics or something, but you're hearing the voice of who I really am.
Yeah.
And all those other things, concepts that have no value in terms of sustainability. Makes sense? If that is the truth, then wouldn't it make even more sense for us to make sure that we are dealing with truth throughout the day, every day of our lives, and anything else, just the things that we call when we are frustrated or when we lose our focus, we are actually reverting to something that is not the mind of the universe or the thoughts of the universe.
Yeah.
We are guided by our soul that those are the thoughts and principles of the universe, the voice, our Creator, and we are that voice. Suppose that's true. I'm done.
Yeah. I like that. I can see that, Pastor. I can see that.
So, seeing that, this is no different than when we were growing up and we were receiving instructions for our growth, to prepare us for what we called life. Then this, what we are talking about, is preparation for us to see clearly, without a doubt, who we are. When I say clearly, without a doubt, I'm talking about without having to constantly make sure we maintain our focus. We get to a place where our spiritual focus remains the same all the time, and everything else is simply necessarily a diversion, but suppose it's simply something to show us what we are, to transform so that it too can be as we are, the universe.
Mm-hmm. Any questions all about that? Any comments? Does it make sense?
Yes. How
Deeply
do I
so,
see
it
with my
does.
soul? I'm sorry. How do I see with my soul?
You see, well, you were saying with your soul, when you sit with it and you see the spiritual approach that you take to whatever you're facing. When Kathy talked about her sitting with it, what did she see? She stopped looking with her eyes and feeling with her earthly emotions, and she engaged with her spiritual emotions and started seeing with her eye. And at that, when you're doing that, you are actually processing from the depth of your soul. And when you see the spiritual solution to it, or the spiritual move or journey that you must take, then you are actually, your soul is actually transforming your mind till you get to that place where you see the transformation immediately. The other night, I said it yesterday, I think, that I was in two worlds. I felt it very real, and I cannot explain it. But I know that I was seeing, as I was talking to someone, I was seeing other things that made sense to me, but I could not articulate them. So when my words not Kathy's, but I'm hoping I'm on the road that she carried us along yesterday when she talked about sitting with it. When we are allowing ourselves to not weigh between what we are dealing with and what we want it to be, when we just sit there neutral and focus on who we are, then our souls begin to transform the pathway that we will take. And as it was the other night with me, I did not know what the end of that pathway or even the scenery along that pathway was going to look like. But I knew because of internal experience that I was on a spiritual journey, and I was being shown what it felt like to be in this world but not of this world. The experience that Jesus had when Jesus was resurrected is not necessarily a physical event. It is an event talking about when you embrace wholeheartedly the spiritual essence of who you are above and beyond this bodily image. It is at that point that you are able to be a citizen, for lack of a better term, of both worlds, and at the same time, you are a citizen of one world because you are a connection between it. And then you get to the place where you go beyond being simply a bridge between the two. You go to a place, or you go to a sense of understanding and awareness that if everything is you and you are everything, then you are not living in two worlds. It's just one world that is dominated by the spiritual essence of your being, and all your processing comes through your soul, which is your spiritual mind. And when it processes through your spiritual mind, which is your soul, then it has an effect on how you think with your earthly mind. And when it begins to transform your earthly thoughts and you see everything as being one, as did our ancestors when they were one with the earth itself. You see everything as being one. So that's when you begin to realize that you are truly everything and everything is you. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Yeah, that was a good question. Thank you. Does that make sense to everybody? Anybody else that need further clarification with that?
Let me ask this question. I was, coming off of what Kathy said yesterday. I wanted to see if that is, excuse me, is that really what she was articulating yesterday? Is that connected with that, or an expansion of it? Are you on, Kathy?
Yes, she's on.
Okay. I don't hear her.
She's getting ready to come to get the mic.
Okay.
Yes, Pastor, what you said was an expansion of what I said yesterday. The only thing I would add to that I failed to say each time, the thing that you're also doing when you are centering yourself and looking at it through your eyes instead of your eyes, is you're quieting all of the noise that's in you at that point too, all those thoughts that are coming your way. You're just letting them, like you always say, pass right through. And you're shutting that down. You're not getting into your emotions and your feelings and thinking, well, now I'm feeling agitated, now I'm feeling nervous, what if this happens, what? You shut all of that down and you just stay focused, you stay centered, and you just sit with it until you receive that inward conviction, and that inward conviction is that place and point of peace that no matter how this thing is going to work out, I got this. I'm going to be okay in this. This situation has to work to my advantage, and you leave it alone. And so that would be the only thing that I would add. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Okay. All right.
I like that. Because part of Cheddar Lamar, the king of Elam, part of all of that is that part of that external thing is fear. So when you're talking about quieting the noise, that's, part of all that is fear. And fear comes from those voices, those thoughts, those little things in us. All of that.
Right.
Sir?
I was just going to say, isn't it amazing? Something happens. The first thing we turn to is fear.
Yeah.
When we start creating these scenarios about what may happen, they usually are negative. Not always, but they usually are. If they say this, I'm going to say that. Why are they calling me in? I didn't do anything. And you don't even know what they call you in for.
Yeah.
So that tells us that we have been indoctrinated to be afraid. And the best way to control people is to make them afraid without them knowing they're afraid. And putting them in positions where they think that the chains have been removed. But they haven't. They've just been changed. They're different chains, invisible chains. But at the same time, they hold you in a place of bondage.
Yeah.
Home church is a chain that holds you in bondage. You go leave your home church? I'm not going to leave my church for nobody. That's bondage. I'm done.
Again, I asked the question we were talking, what is poverty? Part of the staying at my home church or staying in that part of separation that someone has put you in, all of that is part of your poverty. It is the illusion of poverty. If I leave, I lose. If I do this, I lose. If I search for truth and I don't want that rubble, I like the things that I value because I don't know what I'm going to replace it with. When my children grow up and they're adults and they leave the house and they have been, the thought of being a mom has been a God to me. And if they're gone, who am I?
And that goes to show that the only place that we have been finding value is in what we see with our eyes, not what we experience in our soul. We have been trained to be material beings with a disconnect from who we really are. And that being a spiritual being and not knowing it teaches us that we are material and we cannot have any real connection with the spiritual until we die. And the thing that gets me the most about that is this. I hear people saying, the world is going to hell in a handbasket. The world is getting worse. And nothing is changing. So why do you pray? If you believe that there's a God who hears you when you pray, and you're saying that nothing is going to change, so why you pray? Why do you pray and ask for change? It doesn't make sense. So what are you saying? You're saying that your words are just that, words with no meaning, no power, and they're heard by no one except you. Because if you believe that God exists in the way you say God exists, and you're praying to this God, and the world is still getting worse and worse and worse. So how do you account for that? In order for you not to open your eye and see that you're talking about the world is getting worse because the God that you're praying to doesn't exist, is one that you brought into existence. When you see it, if you begin to see it that way, that is when you begin to transition from this place of bondage and begin to understand that this thing that I call prayer is not working, so it got to be something else that I'm missing. And that's when you find yourself. That's when you find yourself. It makes no sense to go to the altar and nothing changes. Nothing. So either you believe that the Creator changes things through you, or you don't. And the reason nothing changes is because we never stop looking for change with our eyes. We never believe that we are the change. We wait on Jesus to come back. We waiting on what you call that thing when everybody in the sky? The rapture, which is non-existent. We wait on all of that. So when nothing changes, then what we are told in religion is, oh, it's going to change when Jesus comes back. So why are you praying now? Just wait till he come back. None of that makes any sense. I'm done. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
So a lot of this relates to that perception of lack. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough self-esteem. I don't have enough people who are on my side, whatever that means. I don't have enough whatever. And when we buy into that perception of lack, whatever that lack is, whatever it is, it cannot exist at the same time as knowing that you are Elohim. Because in Elohim, there is no lack.
Right.
So until I understand, and what you were talking about earlier, Pastor, was, it makes no sense. Well, it doesn't make any sense because it doesn't make sense because I'm still seeing it through the physical eyes. And so I go to that physical altar thinking that something external will happen. But as you were saying earlier, Ron, when we talk about these spiritual altars, the spiritual altars are internal. And that's where I really, really become one with who I am, with the Creator, and who I am with the Creator. And so the spiritual altars are much more powerful because, as you all have been saying, you just meditate, you sit with it, as Kathy says, and you understand that you don't try to create with your own mind. You simply let things flow through. And when we let things flow through, we create that space. We literally create that space so that wisdom comes in, so that what we hear is through the inner ear. What we see is through the inner eye. And then what transforms things is that. And so we act on that transformation, not with the eyes, but with the eye. And when we act on that, what we see with the eye, what is created is totally different from what would have been created had we acted on what we saw with our physical eyes.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said.
So really, what we call chaos is really clay. And we mold that clay with our spiritual hands. And we don't know what it's going to look like until it appears. Because we are not the ones who's shaping it. It is the unicity that we have with the universe who is making us aware of it. Because when we see that chaos as clay, in actuality, that chaos is already order. We are just not experiencing it yet because of our eyes and what we are accustomed to. Keep in mind that Jesus didn't even see spiritually in totality and function spiritually in totality until after the resurrection. After the resurrection. Abraham didn't know who he was till he came out of Egypt after his resurrection. It's always after resurrection that you can see more clearly as to who you are and become one in the world. We call it both worlds, but it's actually one world. Because if it were not one world, our bodies, these bodies in this physical world, this physical body couldn't exist because it is the spiritual that we call breath that keeps it in existence, as well as everything else that we see with our eyes. We are, as Ron said, spiritual nomads. Everyone helps everyone, and putting things in the macro is simply feeding the multitude. I'm done.
I think the last two statements, Bob and Pastor, summed this up beautifully. Any questions or comments? This is good. No questions or comments. This may be a good place to take a pause. And I want to make sure everybody got this, everybody sees it. We good?
I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good.
Thank you.
Ron, I just have a comment. because what
Yes, ma'am.
Pastor just said just resonated so much with me. What we put into the spiritual macro is for everyone. It's almost it's like when you talked about feeding everybody in the neighborhood when you were physically feeding everybody in the neighborhood, but it was the example of a spiritual principle of feeding everybody and reminding them who they are. And when Pastor talked about the spirit putting things into the macro, it's like those seeds the spiritual seeds that we're putting there that will feed everyone who is willing to partake of it. Oh, do you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And
Definitely.
so that's what we're sowing when we speak and we put it in the macro. We're literally providing spiritual food for everyone who desires it and partakes of it. Thanks.
Thank you. Oh, I love this. I hope everybody got a thought or question. Got a thought from this. But if you have questions, please jot them down. We would certainly discuss it, okay? But it's a good place to take a pause, and I hope you have a great day, rest of your Sunday. And don't forget 3 o'clock, everyone, the teachers, Pastor, and everyone else have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow evening at 6. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.